In this lesson, we will learn how to organize our scene using layers. It's always convenient to have a way to turn off the selection or hide certain pieces in our scene just to work faster. Now, as of right now, if we wanted to, let's say, hide our aircraft, we could always use the Display tab here. We can head over to Hide by Category, and notice we have an option to hide our geometry. But again, that's going to hide all pieces of geometry, so it's not going to do us much good if it's only the aircraft we want hidden. So this is where layers can truly be beneficial to our workflow. Just having a way to either hide certain pieces or even make sure that certain pieces will not able to be selected. So let's go ahead and take a look at our layer manager. In Max, we'll go ahead and right click an empty space on our toolbar and choose layers. Alright, great. From here we can have this docked on our toolbar by simply dragging the title bar and sliding it over to the top. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at our layer manager by clicking on this icon to the left. Notice by default we already have a layer created, so every object that we add in our scene is added to this default layer. If we need to hide all objects in the scene, we can go to the Hide category here and click on the icon to hide those objects. If we want to make sure that all objects are not able to be selected, we'd want to click on the freeze icon. Notice we have this white material added, and let's just know that this object is currently not selectable. So very helpful. Now if you want to freeze an object but still see the applied material, what you can do is right click on your layer and choose Object Properties. From there you can go ahead and turn off Show Frozen in Gray and choose OK, and now we're brought back to the material. Okay, but still this default layer is not going to do us much good. Chances are you're going to want to leave this layer alone and just work with custom layers. It's the safest way. Alright, so what we can do is go ahead and unfreeze our default layer, and now we can go ahead and create a brand new layer. So what I'll do with nothing selected is just go in and create a layer. Now what you'll see is that this layer here is now checked. What that means is that it is now the active layer. So what does an active layer do? Well, whenever we create an object, it is now going to be added to the checked or active layer. If I were to go in and hide this layer and create a cube, let's go ahead and just make a box and start to draw this out. Notice we cannot see it because our layer here is hidden. Once we unhide it, there is the box. Alright, so what this means is that we should always make sure the default layer is active once our layer has been made, unless you want to keep this new layer active for a while. But I tend to just make sure that once the layer is made, we go back to the default layer and make that active. So we'd want to click on that box to make sure that's checked. Let's go ahead and get rid of this box. It's had its minute of fame and glory, so we'll just go ahead and remove it. Alright, so next we'll want to go in and rename this layer. Then I'll show you how to add objects and remove objects from it. So let's go ahead and click to rename this layer, and we can always call this aircraft. So we'll make sure that the aircraft is added to this. Alright, so from there, if we want to add the aircraft, we can go ahead and select the group, which is its top node, hold down Control and press page down to grab all child objects. So once the entire hierarchy is selected, we can now select our layer and choose Add. Alright, great. So now you'll see that when we go ahead and hide this, only the aircraft is hidden. So you can see how useful layers are. If we want to go ahead and freeze the aircraft, we can go ahead and choose Freeze, and notice it has now been frozen. We cannot select it, but we can select the other objects around it. Now why is this not gray? We have frozen this. Well, remember our default layer, we've made sure to turn off the gray option. So once we have done that and we create a new layer, Max is going to remember that setting. So that's something important to keep in mind. Alright, now what if we wanted to go ahead and remove these objects? Well, you can see we have a remove icon here, but this is to remove a layer. Now, If we were to go ahead and select our aircraft layer and try to remove it, notice we cannot do it. It's grayed out simply because there are objects already added to it. So very important, if you want to remove an object from your layer, what you'd want to do is go ahead and select the object. So I'll go ahead and unfreeze the aircraft layer. We'll want to select the object. So I'll go ahead and select the group, press Control page down to make sure all objects that have been added to this layer are selected. Then we'd want to select the layer to add those objects to, which is the default layer, and then we choose Add. Notice now you can see that there is no longer an expansion icon next to our aircraft layer. So what that means is once we highlight it, we can now go in and delete that layer. Alright, let's go ahead and recreate our aircraft layer. Watch this, with all objects still selected, we can create it much faster and add those objects automatically. Alright, so now if we were to go ahead and hide this layer, you could see that all objects have been added to this layer because we have selected those objects and then created the layer. So remember, once the layer is made, we want to make sure the default layer is active, and now we can go to layer 1 here and rename it. So we'll go ahead and rename this aircraft. Another thing I like to point out before we create our other layers is that when we go ahead and expand this, notice we can get to specific parts of our aircraft that we would like to either hide or freeze, which is very helpful. So we have a lot of useful control with the layer manager in 3ds Max. Alright, so we have created one for our aircraft. What would be another good idea to create a layer for? How about our control object? Especially for character rigs, it'd be a great way to just go in and hide or show those control objects. Alright, so let's go ahead and select our control object and create a layer for it. Again, we want to make sure our default layer is active. And then we'll go back to the new layer that was made and we'll go ahead and name this. So we could always call this controls. Great, so now we can go ahead and show that layer if we'd like, or keep it hidden just to make it easier to add the other objects to layers. So the next object we will add will be our fueling line. So let's go ahead and marquee select so we could also grab the shape that was used to make the fueling line, because we will be using that to add more resolution to kind of smooth this out a bit. I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. And this is all so that we can have better deformation. So with the fueling line selected, we can now go in and create a new layer. Let's make sure the default layer is active. And let's go ahead and rename this to fueling underscore line. Beautiful. We'll test this out by toggling our hide icon. Now you can see that there is a circle in the scene that was used to create the fueling line, but it no longer does anything. Its history has been separated from the fueling line. So I'm going to go ahead and select that object and actually remove it just to clean up the scene a bit. Alright, great. So now we'll go ahead and add our fueling station. Let's go ahead and grab everything, create a new layer. Let's make sure that the default layer is again active. And we'll go ahead and name this fueling underscore station. Alright, great. Now there is just one more layer that we're going to hide, or excuse me, add to make it more convenient to hide objects that we will not want to see when it's time to animate our aircraft. So I like to call this layer objects to hide. If you've worked with control objects before, you might have seen a layer like this in your scene, and it's typically named don't touch. And it's just a way of adding clarity to let artists know that they should not use any of the objects in that layer unless they need to. So let's go ahead and create it with nothing selected. We'll just go in and create an empty layer. We're going to go ahead and name this objects to hide. Great. Alright, so now again we'll make our default layer active, and let's go ahead and start to show the layers we need to show. So that's pretty much everything. Great, so in this lesson we have learned how to work with the layer manager in 3ds Max just to make it more convenient for us to work with our assets.